Okay. Welcome. Namaste and welcome.
Yeah, you forgot.
Hi, honey.
Yes.
Do you want to have an opening act, or are you ready to go?
I know.
I am ready for you to go.
Opening act. Well, good afternoon and happy Pongal. Yeah. I'm delighted to be able to say a few things about my experience connected to Satri and Satchmai and New Dharma for the purpose of helping you get to know them a little bit. And earlier today I was in a small group. We have lots of small groups. Thank you. And one of the things that I sort of knew before, but I really have known in the last 4 years, is that aliveness is related to vulnerability and authenticity. And I vote for aliveness. So, hi. Come
Hi,
on.
there's lots of chairs up here.
Chairs up here. Namaste. Happy Pongal.
Come on up.
So in the service to aliveness, I have to tell you something. I have to be vulnerable here. I don't know if you have noticed, but I have not actually introduced myself. Move over, get
The
back.
immediacy is getting closer to the audience.
Oh, how about
it's this
you?
thing-
Okay.
Yeah, I'm tied to the
Okay.
chair.
So I am Saraswati, and that is the most vulnerable I could be in telling you that I have that name. Before I met Satri, when I started my little spiritual, marketplace journey, I would see these folks who would come in with a teacher, and they'd have on some garb, and they would say these names, and I'm going, you've got to be kidding. Why would you ever? And here I am.
But you don't have the garb. You just have the name.
This is just kind of regular garb, but you can't disguise this name. This name will not pass.
Humiliation comes in many forms.
It does. So here I am, I'm Saraswati, for about the last 2 years. And the cool thing about the name, of course, is that, you live your way into it. And I knew the qualities to some degree of Saraswati, but I didn't know a lot of them, and I have lived my way into them, and it's been actually quite remarkable. And I just have to bear this uncomfortable feeling every time I use my name. Okay, so I met Satri in August of 2015. And I guess a couple months before that, a friend of mine was at my house, and she said, I'm going to drive a friend's car from Colorado, where we live, to San Francisco, and by the way, I'm going to Nevada City to see this guy. And I just came out of me, it said, I'm going with you. And that's really unusual because I was still very involved in my professional life, and I had no idea if I wouldn't be on an airplane somewhere, but in fact there was space. And I went to Nevada City for an intensive. That's in Northern California. And I have two memories from that. One is that I was stunned by the resonance in me of the truth you were speaking. And then there was this moment when it was over, and for about 25 seconds, you and I were standing together on the porch outside the door. Mm-hmm. And I just remember looking up, and you were as tall as a skyscraper.
Wow. And
you had this hat on, and this madman wizard hair sticking straight out. And you just looked at me and kind of go, like that. I could think of nothing to say, and I'm pretty good at coming up with something. I was just dumbfounded. And now having a conversation with you is one of the most delights of my life. There's always more to say. Yeah. And I just would like to share one more thing. It's after that I went back to Colorado, and I had this dream that was clearly, had you in the dream. And you told me to go to Denver to take 4 desks, like school desks like I had in the 4th grade, put them together under a bridge, the kind of bridge Denver doesn't have, and burn them. And so I've been working with that dream for 4 years. And the surface meaning is pretty interesting, like get out of your mind. You're too educated. Okay, I can sort of work on that. But the part that I didn't know was that how much working on that would take me into my body. And that's one of the really big gifts of your work is you've got to know the truth of things in your body, because I knew them in my head. I was a self-inquiry junkie. And I love to find the patterns and the structures and, diagram them out, and I could see how my life worked, and then I'd be doing 5 years later the same damn thing I'd done 5 years before. So it never really shifted until I started getting into the body. So welcome to Satri and Satchmai and New Dharma. Thank you.
Thank you, Saraswati. That was really awesome. Saraswati. We should have T-shirts made.
Sarah, what?
So I'd like to, we've all met Satri. I'm Satchmai. And Satri and I have been married for 35 years. And about 13 years into our marriage, is when he had his first awakening, which then, within the next year, brought him to Tiruvannamalai on the other side of the mountain where his teacher, Sri Atmananda, is with Satya Chaitanya International. Leaving me at home with everything. And so that was our process. It was a dual process. He was here in India, I was in the States. And we both had our own process to come to where we are today. It took 25 years, right? 22? Took a while. Nothing happens quickly on the spiritual path. For those, you can have that awakening, but that's not the end. That's just the beginning. So we're going to let him talk about that because he had that experience. And I was there for a good part of it. So neither one of us were seekers. He had been a seeker of Mira Baba, or a student of Mira Baba, many, many, many years before. But the whole time we were together, there was no seeking. So when this happened, it was really unexpected. And it took a long time to find out exactly what this meant. So and we meet people all the time that are awakened and there's just like for every one of you in this room, you have your own unique awakening. So there's not one kind, which is perfect because I spent years thinking, how come I didn't get what he got? Because he had the bliss and the Ananda and the angels and, traveling through the planes and all this other stuff. And I'm an awareness being, so everything is like out there. It's all about nothing. But that's not really true. But somehow it all meets in the middle. So I manifest the mission. That's my job with a number of people in this room who help out. And we're based in the United States. We come to India. We came back to his India home, starting about 2011, I think. And we've been coming every single year since then. We're lucky to have a good base here. We have about 42 people. They're just finishing up the first session, and we start a second session where people will be coming for that. And then when we're not in India, we're back in the United States and Nevada. And if we're not there, we're in Europe. So it's been quite the ride. And Satri's like, are we going to travel less? And I'm always like, yeah, lie. Well, people keep asking us to come, like Tanya, she's like, what would it take to bring him to Barcelona? I was like, start a group. And of course, she starts a group. And it worked. So anyway, we're just really thrilled you're here. He'll be doing most of the talking, Satri will. And then you have an opportunity, if you wish, to come up and just ask a question or just sit in the chair. You can do what Saraswati did. Look up. The hair is no longer crazy.
Today.
And the hat's in the back of the room, right? Yeah. So, yep. But this is this is probably about as casual as you can get here. Yeah, we don't stand on ceremony, so we're just happy to have you here. Thank you.
Now, isn't this cool?
What?
I can't tell you how much kicking and screaming went on before she could own being who she is and where she is.
Well, I like standing in front of a room.
She's discovered the drama in her. All right, so very
Thank
good.
you, Eric. Okay.
All right, thank you all. So I was feeling to kind of enter into a kind of a background teaching that gives a kind of what I like to say right information. Most of my work does, well, four things. One is communicate right information about the nature of the path, so people can come to a correct understanding of what they're going through and be able to bring their intelligence to collaborate with their process. The second thing we do is create trainings. These are cauldrons, events, 6 days and 9 days or weekend events, where the pressure of the force that has come to me builds and starts creating transformation. And that's the third item. The force starts entering from the inside out and starts pushing up a quality of your consciousness that can begin to see and experience itself, or the who it is, from a different vantage point, with greater clarity, greater presence, greater recognition. The third thing, or the fourth thing actually, that we do is that we give you opportunities for you to learn how to manifest what's coming to you. That means how to, in the process of going through the education, the training, and the transformation, something of your true nature comes forward into your personality. It starts modifying and enhancing the quality of the person of you. And along that way, we become useful. We become channels or instruments for a force greater than us. So we have programs that people can open their own groups. They can start their own inquiries. They can conduct their own meditations, and in the process begin to effectively bring what's come to them to others, and also learn to articulate your own experience more fully as you share it. Also, when you're working with other people is where you see yourself in them. And you recognize more and more how we're all in this same process, be it human or be it spiritual, of coming into the right relationship with existence, bottom line, with the very essential quality of what we are. Not our human ego, not our fears, not our adaptions and compensating behaviors or accomplishments, but as essential human beings moving into relationship with other human beings. And this is an existential process. It is about coming into existence more truly, more without our putting up preconditions, setting up criteria for it's safe or in control or the way we want it, to come out of the structures of expectations and familiarity and comfort and preference into life as it is, and allow for life as it is to show. And in the process, discover the wonder of that which you have not yet met. The discovery of those parts of yourself and life, because they're closely related, that you were separated from without realizing you were doing so. And in the process, our capacity to be authentic, to be true, expands. Our ability to be in touch with ourselves and what's going on with ourselves when it's happening. Our ability to be in relationship and connection with other people expands in ways that we couldn't imagine as a human being. When we step out of our own investment to have what we want and the way we want it, and we step into the world to serve it for a greater possibility, we discover that what we really wanted wasn't what we thought we wanted. What was really important wasn't what we imagined was real important. There is something about being in existence in the full awake consciousness of what we are with who we are. So there's stages of the journey. Now, I didn't know that when the awakening happened. I thought an awakening would happen and then you would just sort of hang on to the awakening. And that was the nature of the path. And my particular awakening is the universe opened up. So it wasn't just like popping out of the person into what I am, but it was this popping out into a complete different dimension of reality. And the characteristic of that, I recognize now, but had no clue then, was that I had at some time in my life already awakened, or else perhaps I was awakened before, and I brought that with me. So that by the time I was 50, I was ready for an awakening beyond my individual awakening into this relationship with the universal matrix that's behind all of creation, that includes beings and forces and domains and miraculous, unspeakable wonders that are not available to us in our own individual awakening. Maybe we get glimpses of. So this process, I thought, was my original awakening. So it wasn't until I started interacting with other people when I recognized, oh, most people are coming out of the content of themselves, of their personhood, their fears, their ideas of what spirituality is, their beliefs, the things that they use their spiritual experience to compensate for parts of their ego that hasn't actually been able to come into existence yet. So many structures, but for me, I had lived my human life. I had done all that by the time this next awakening happened. So I recognized, oh, okay, there is an awakening that occurs of our individual truth. In the Bhagavad Gita, which is a book that I've learned to use as a reference, a very valuable description of the stages of the journey, it's coming to the self. Whereas Ramana says, the I am, the I thought. That's the first stage of the journey, and it has stages. And it's the first stage of the awakening, which is usually being terrifically miserable. Often there are some awakenings where you're relieved from misery, but a lot of awakenings are this long period of dejection, of recognizing you're bound and not being able to get out of yourself. And the desperation of that pushes the consciousness to the point where it starts seeking to understand, to find the source of it. You go to therapists, you try to get better, you try medications, you try different kinds of relationships, different kind of jobs. It doesn't soothe what's called a dejection, which is when the soul starts coming forward into existence, and the person, the values, and the things that were important to the person of us fade away in importance. They lose their ability to sustain us. They seem empty. Everything feels empty in that awakening of the dejection. And then there's this quest to understand the nature of what is of a greater truth, and usually it comes through a spiritual exposure. A spiritual teaching, a spiritual teacher, some other people who you know, who have had some traveling on a spiritual journey. And the response to that, to the newly awakening person, is a recognition. They recognize that this person or this teaching or this teacher has something I'm thirsty for, that I long for. That's the calling up of that part of ourselves that is longing for something greater than the human embodiment. And that leads just to new actions. The discrimination that comes from getting connection and the teachings and the information lead you to start meditating, learning chants, spending time out of the rat race, discovering the nature of you that's emerging. And this is the development of the discernment or the discrimination of the nature of what we are versus the content, the story of who we are. So there is this emerging clarity that it comes when we start living aligned with that recognition. As that goes on, the quality of what we start finding is a direct access to what is the essential reality that we are. And that direct access feels like peace, or silence, or stillness. We find a place in us that does not move, does not cling, does not grasp, does not need to do. It comes to a relationship with our very being. To be in existence becomes the most important thing. And the anguish of that part of the journey is the endless discovery of how we prevent ourselves from being that way, from coming into existence aligned with that greater truth, that greater wisdom that's coming. And that causes us to start letting go of the things in our lives that are getting in the way of our ability to move into more true relationship with that inner reality we are. So that's where we start shedding the things in our life that we've held on to, or we've made important, or that we still have some desire or ambition for. We start letting go of needing a future or hanging on to a past. It's not something we do consciously. It's just no longer can we hang on to them. No longer can we feel to grasp for them. It all starts falling away into a peaceful emptiness, a peaceful quality of your own presence. So you recognize what we're talking about? So this recognition of this, what we're speaking of, is what's in the room here with you, and it is what brought you into this room, because this part of you is what can recognize the opportunity of the next stage of whatever that unfoldment may be. And that's what I'm sharing with you. There are stages. So the first stage is coming into a steady, stable relationship with that quality of awakening. Now, some people can only do that by living in a cabin in the woods or in a monastery, or it only happens during retreats, and they haven't been able to hang on to it in their lives. They want to, but they can't seem to organize themselves to do so. But it's still relatively always there, waiting for the time when you just stop being you, and it rises up. When one comes to that place, then the maturity of the individual awakening has expanded you. And at some point, if we can come out of the happy adaptation of that state, and come out of our cabin in the woods, we come into and start meeting the world more fully, then the universe begins to prepare ourselves for our universal nature, to start meeting these universal principles which are inherent in us, inherent in our capacity to know ourselves, inherent in that very essential quality of what we are, coming more fully into existence as us, as you. So it starts demonstrating these feelings of connection with something greater, these moments of infinity and eternal unchanging, a glimpse of the heavens, a glimpse of the dimensions where there are beings and forces and experiences that can occur that are superhuman, beyond the sensory, supersensory, where the mind is in the background and there is just this quality of immediacy and knowing. And you start diving into domains that are beyond just often this physical domain, but also within this physical domain. You walk into the woods and everything is looking at you. You look into the sky and that vastness is there for you. You walk on the earth and you know it's there for you to walk on. You begin to recognize something of the sacredness of what you actually are. And this discovery of that nature always brings us great gratitude, because the ego becomes irrelevant at that point. The ego is no longer necessary in its compensating structures, and its getting love and getting being seen and feeling as a good person. All that becomes irrelevant when you get in touch with the sacredness that's trying to emerge itself in you. And there often comes this feeling of freedom and gratitude and recognition of a greater possibility than the one you had been living previously. So it's the trickle of the stream going into the river into the lake into the ocean. So there's this unfolding that comes in this journey. And when this comes and establishes itself, this next phase, which is really an introduction, continuous series of introductions, and that's what happened for me for about 6 years, the universal dimensions. And I couldn't have recognized it as a Westerner. I probably would have gotten stuck up in one parts of the things, because there were such incredible powers and incredible experiences. And I actually thought when that was happening that the thing I needed to do was experience all those and have them last. But in fact, they all would go through my hands like sand through a sieve. It couldn't be held. They'd always come and go, come and go. And I said, okay, so they're each a piece of truth, but it's not the source. Each are a reflection of something that's bursting into creation, demonstrating these qualities, but they're not the source of that. And there was a slow recognition that had me continue to go beyond that and be willing to let go of that to discover something eternal, something unchanging, which I call the Sat, the absolute truth. So I went through the heavens, and then I came to the vast void, the vast truth. And in that place, I recognized it was a greater truth. And then that void came to me. And for 3.5 years, it would throw me into states of samadhi that would last for days. And in that time, I began to recognize the nature of the truth of what I am, the truth of what you are, the sense of the purpose of the creation, the opportunity and the framework that's behind all of this, that's there for the purpose of this principle of truth consciousness, manifesting as you. It was really clear for me that I wasn't doing this journey, that I was being taken along on this journey by forces that were other than my ego, forces that were living me and taking it over. And it comes right down to it that that same force that was living me as a human being is this supreme force, this supreme being quality. So in that recognition, the thing that was left when that came, in that moment, and when it established after 3.5 years, I recognized there was no teacher and that I was all teachers. There was no students and I was all students. I recognized there was no separation and made no sense at all to do anything. So I said goodbye to my teacher with loving gratitude, and I went and lived in a little room above a daycare center in Olympia, Washington. At that time, although in those periods of years, that was about 7-8 years, I would come back to the United States and Satsang would be together for periods of time, and I would do work for my teacher. But this time I went and left 500 miles away.
He told you.
Yeah, he actually told me to get away. And I just lived in this little room, going to my samadhis and having all these experiences and being perfectly content. There was no sense there was anything to be done. And then slowly, bit by bit, the universe started showing up and asking something of me. And the thing that I noticed at that point, that though in the state of truth it was quiet, when I started re-entering into the world, I began to tap into a cry of the dejected soul. I began tapping into the all souls seeking truth. And it was a cry, and it was so compelling that I was willing to sacrifice everything to serve that. And so out of that love and out of that compassion, organized and created, my teacher also told me to create a nonprofit, and both Satsang and myself are familiar with nonprofits. So we created a nonprofit together, New Dharma, which purpose is to reestablish a Dharma that has been lost or forgotten during periods of darkness, coming again and again, to strengthen the virtue and to diminish the ignorance so that Dharma could be restored, which is there in the Bhagavad Gita. And I recognize that's my purpose too. That's the purpose of any awakened teacher, is to strengthen the virtue so people can know the truth of themselves and help them diminish the error of the embodiment and the habit and the conditioning we all took on in our innocence, trying to heal it. And in the process, empower people to find their true Dharma, their Satya Dharma, that brings them into a place where they can be useful to the world. So then there's this manifestation. So the stage is coming out of your ego into the self, going beyond the self into God or truth, and then coming and bringing it back in the world in service for others to be able to travel those same steps. Well, this is pretty much what we teach. This is pretty much the framework, the context. I also teach it in the recognition. I'm a Westerner, and I was not seeking anything like this. But I went and I immersed myself in India, and I immersed myself in the spiritual field that India has kept alive for thousands of years, but has been lost in the West. And in the process, something of the recognition of what is the Guru, what is the Satguru, what are the forces of spiritual transformation, what are the natures, the difference between a transmission of truth and a transmission of Shakti, divine bliss, which is more effective, what supports what. This whole recognition of the wisdoms of this part of the world, about the fundamental nature of reality and the opportunity for humanity to move into relationship with it. So when I came back, though, I think the thing that was unique is the ability to language this, to speak it, to share it, and to create structures in which people can discover this for themselves. Okay. So I think that's the thing I just wanted to bring forward. So the important point is that the awakening is the beginning of a truing, of an aligning of yourself with something that you couldn't imagine possible from the diminished ego, from the compensating egoic structure, striving to come out of diminishment, trying to prove itself, trying to be okay. And all those things being able to fall away gives an experience of freedom, of peace, and eventually love, a connection with all others who are struggling to come out of the same quagmire. They know it or not. All right, so that's what I thought I'd bring forward tonight. So what goes on here now is any of you, we're going to first open it up more to new people. Any questions you have, any things you wish to share about the nature of your own journey, your own quest, or about where you are in your process? And this will be your time to come forward. You would just come forward and introduce, just say your name and just share. Now that I've shut up. You can begin to sense the presence. So I just invite you to just take a moment and see if you can sense the presence that's in the room. And then presence, of course, is something you are. And if there's something there that wants to come more fully into existence, then that will push you to come and sit in this seat. And if you can feel that presence, feel it in your body. Turn inward. Connect to yourself. Let that speak to you. Because really, truth is always what's here right now. Presence needs no past, no future. All that matters to that quality of us that's presence is this, here, now. See if your mind goes quiet. See if your heart comes forward. See if you can feel the energy in your body. presence has three qualities: truth, consciousness, and bliss, or love. Truth is the presence itself. Consciousness is the knowingness, the recognition. And the bliss is Ananda. And the Ananda dissolves all fear, all separation. In that moment, it's always in moments. Learning to live from that moment is the art of living. Sure. What do you have to lose?
Hello, everyone. I come just up to say that there is hope because it's already.
Hold the microphone.
Yeah. I say to all of you that there is hope because it's already here. It's already in every one of you, and that's the beauty. So you have just to surrender and let go.
Thank you.
Let
beautiful.
go every imagination. Just come here. Yeah. Yeah. And the life will show up as this. This has to show up. You don't have to push anything. It comes from itself. And I wish it for everything. I had this, coming to this place some years ago. And from then on, it's like I would not change it for anything. And it's what you explained.
Beautiful, thank you. Perfect. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. You just put the microphone on. We didn't get her name, but she wasn't a plant.
She is a plant.
No name. No person left, just the being. Thank you. Thank you.
I think you should open it up to the room. It's not true.
Hmm?
Open it up to the room.
It's open.
Okay, anybody can come, even our people. So. Yes.
I wanted to come up and,
Say your name.
Angela. And I can't even remember exactly what you said, but it was about existence. And I just wanted to come up to acknowledge that my heart started to beat, not out of fear, but just like, it was this
Recognition.
consistent, just beautiful. And I just feel such peace right now in my body.
Beautiful.
And I just wanted to bring that into the room. So,
That's it? Beautiful. Perfect. Thank you. Resonance. Resonance. We're all like each a tuning fork with a different note. And we're vibrating out and creating an impact for those who can receive it. That can open up that matching resonance within ourselves. I call it recognition, because that's the knowing what it is in yourself. This is the quality of knowing that goes beyond mind and intellect and doing or having even right information. It's just a knowing immediacy that calls us into existence more deeply and truly than otherwise. If we can find a way to stay in touch with that resonance, and then we can bring modalities, tools, or methods by which we can stay in that resonance, then we expand our capacity to hold it and be a channel for it, for others, just like our lovely no-name lady shared for all of us. So there is she said, there's hope. It is because the nature of the immediacy of truth is the sense of possibility. A possibility of something greater, of something more than what we've taken for granted or what it seems like. When we're in that resonance, that sense of the possibility that life is like a bubble of being, of potentiality that we can step into. And in that bubble, it creates the next bubble, and that for the next moment, the next now. So you can live from moment of possibility to moment of possibility. And the invitation here, of course, is a moment of possibility for you. Every time you've taken action aligned with the possibility, then that ability to take action when the next possibility comes is more available to you. It's like falling into from this now to next now, rather than having an expectation or something from the past shaping the future. Just the immediacy and the directness, the naturalness, the realness that includes every part of us, our human as well as spiritual. It's my experience in God's eyes, there's only perfection. There's only beauty, even in the ugly. There's only opportunity and possibility, even in the most contraction, the greatest pain or sorrow or anger or separation. She did it. Yeah, go ahead, say your name.
My name is Kaya, and first I just wanted to offer, I know you're giving a course. If I've learned quite a lot in the last 35, 40 years since awakening with what I've gone through and the different kinds of professionals that work for different levels. If any of that is useful, I'm happy to share.
So what I'd like to know is, how was your journey through that? What was it? What was it that motivated you? What happened for you? What did you discover?
Really different at different times. I mean, it's a roller coaster from the bliss of total openness into the depths of conditioning and childhood trauma and anguish and getting pissed off with my guru and, like all kinds of, there's just like ups and downs. So it's almost like the light of openness revealed the shadows that had previously kept me.
Very good. It's a universal process, what you're describing, that we'll all go through. We can't bring more light except by meeting the darkness. What is it that's obscuring our ability to know our own reality is part of our conditioning. And it's not just understanding it, it's not just thinking it, it's not just therapize it. It's actually moving into relationship with it in such a way that the very way it grabs us can be released. So this whole idea of moving into relationship with darkness, I call it being a darkness eater rather than a eater of light, because the way we can expand light is by eating the darkness. And it's eating. I call it eating the elephant, the thing you don't want to be with, the beast you don't know how to be with. It's tough, it's chewy, and you can only eat it one bite at a time. Then you have to swallow it, digest it, and eliminate it. So there's this process that we have to go through that takes us into relationship to our unmet parts, our unwanted parts, because there's this whole universe. Just knowing the light parts, or the beautiful parts, leaves half of the universe separate. So clearly the process is a process of inclusion, or learning to include, as you're saying.
And what drives the process is a kind of running into the light away from the very thing you should face. So I think I was running to light to avoid all of the feelings I had in my body, so I got really dissociated, and all of the energetic disturbances that went with that, to the point that I didn't even know how to get back into my body.
Yeah.
And not an uncommon element on the spiritual path, to stay transcendent. But there's no real progress. You will have your piece of transcendence, but unless you bring it back into the body, you cannot continue to expand in it. It's when we bring it back into the body that it gets real. Now, is that something you've discovered?
Totally.
Totally. Good for you.
And you think, like my understanding of what I was being taught spiritually is that if you know the source of your being, then you de-identify, and then,
It's
you'll
just the
become...
vast everything.
Yeah, yeah. So...
It's a trick. It's useful. It has a role to play. But it's the preparatory work. It prepares you to be able to do the real work. But the real work you don't want to do. And that's what you have to work on. Doing what you don't want to do. Meeting what you don't want to meet. Learning to see the opportunity. Developing a taste for elephant.
The light was useful once I just saw, okay, that's a starting point. So I know the part of me that's unchanging. From there, I started getting the strength of connection with that to start facing the pain I was avoiding.
Perfect. Exactly.
I went to energy workers that moved it out of my body or helped me, and to therapists that helped me just be with pain and move through it. I worked through a lot on a yoga mat, on a 5 rhythms dance floor. I sung it out. I broke rocks at the river. So it's like moving it out of the body-mind field. Yeah.
All right. So a good start. It's a good start. But grounding is not just working with rocks or putting your feet into the dirt. Grounding is meeting the collective ancestral karma that came from your mother, came from your father, that is shaping your life, which you're avoiding experiencing. It comes from where you stop in relationship. It comes where you retreat from, in overwhelm, from forces that you have not yet been able to be with, or challenges that you don't want to be with. Grounding comes by meeting the lessons of life. If we haven't met them as human beings, if we haven't met the challenges in relationship, challenges in becoming an independent person, challenges in coming into life as an individual, then the spiritual path will require us to do that in order to come and become stable in the higher states. It's a process of maturation. It's a process of preparation. And each stage will bring us to the next level of that which we do not yet know how to be with. And that process. It is what true transformation is. Learning each time you meet something that you didn't know was there, or you find yourself in despair or into a pattern of getting overwhelmed or diminished, and you find you can hold that and not get overtaken by that in your body, as you're saying, that a peace comes, that the structure dissolves in the presence of you when you're in the issue at the level it was created. Now, that's not easy to do at first. We get to all the compensating structures on top of the issue. So we have a trauma, and then we have another trauma to avoid that trauma, and then we have a trauma to avoid that trauma, and so we have these collection of unexperienced experiences. So we start with the one most accessible. When we meet it and the peace comes, we descend to the one that's prior to that. And when we come to greater peace and presence with that, we meet the next level and next level. When we get down to the lower levels, we start meeting our ancestral karma. We start meeting our mom, our dad, their mother, their dad, the error of the collective consciousness that they're a reflection of, that we're all a reflection of. And that transformation, when you start getting down into those archetypal structures that have shaped all humanity, is what opens us up to the universe. Then we begin to recognize and see how all of us are in this tangle, this weave of error, of striving to come into existence as separate beings, pushing away the natural world, pushing away our very beingness in order to be, to do, to have, to accomplish, to get. And this causes an error that accumulates and accumulates and keeps us separate from that original nature. So you begin to see how the universe is set up for the purpose for souls to dive into humanity, to learn to become a human. Many souls don't make it. They come to their mother's wound and they say, enough. Embryo is too much. I'm not going to do it. That's it. I'm out of here. So you have a miscarriage. Soul isn't ready. Has to do that 4 or 5 other times. And then it says, okay, let me see if I can do this. And then it pops out and it says, screw it, I'll die on the birth. I can't handle this. Learning to become embodied is torture for the unembodied soul. So when we descend from the higher domains and we start being pulled to the earth experience, we're being called to become something separate from what we were originally. And in the process, we start tapping into a quality of truth that's in matter, that's in ignorance, that's in the depths of the unconscious.
Before I started this series of lifetimes here, I was intrigued by the challenge of being able to manifest light in this density. I think I've been shocked by what goes on here. It's taken a bit to unwind back through several past lives, to just face the fears and the traumas of things that have happened in the past. I'm at a stage now where it's kind of like, bring it on. It's like whatever's left.
You got a taste for elephant.
So my aim is a clean death, no issues.
Very good.
But also to be able to walk fully embodied on earth in the full openness and presence that I knew before I came.
Exactly. That's actually the ultimate purpose, is for us to come as a piece of the Supreme Being into existence, to know ourselves fully and thereby be able to experience its own existence fully. Whenever we take actions aligned with that, we empower the opportunity of life. Whenever we take actions not aligned with that, we disempower the opportunity of life. We lose our energy. So moving aligned with the opportunity of coming more fully in existence is a process of empowering the very current that lives us, allowing it to flow into us, allowing it to come into existence through us, as us. And that's the wonder of it.
And my current belief is that I've lived all of these incarnations to understand why humanity is stuck at this time. And my interest at the moment is in widening out to our collective conditioning, and I think I mentioned this in the first one, but there's a whole mesh of ideas and values that we're brought up with, that we're schooled in. And that value system is what has taken us into ill health and stress and the planetary situation right now. So it's a kind of a huge job, but it's what I feel really called to do, looking for playmates. And the direction I'm about to take is a little bit different from so far. Everything to do with transformation has been personal. It's like you work on clearing your own stuff, and so this direction is a little bit at odds with the spiritual conditioning I have, which is, more on my meditation seat and introspective. And I'm not quite sure what my question is, but I wondered if you would speak to that, because,
Sure.
I wonder if I should be keeping or moving out of those previous.
You are very stable in the self at this point, and you're on the verge of being able to be capable of being useful in a collective way. So this transition often is not so apparent in Western spirituality, because it's about coming to the self and finding the peace of that. And when you come to the self, all you really want to do is stay in the happiness and wisdoms that are available to you. And there's no need, no motive to go into the world and do anything. It's actually a rest point. It's like base camp. You come out of Kathmandu and you go to base camp. Base camp is a little city now, They recycle and they have toilets and they have all kinds of things up there now. But the real work is Everest. So the nature of the base camp is, how do you get up there? You're not going to be able to get up there yourself. You're not going to be able to kind of create what you've known to traverse the territory where there's no oxygen, no food, no rest, and that you're going to be challenging yourself at levels that you couldn't imagine you would have the strength to challenge yourself at. So how do we do that? The only way we can do that is by somebody who's traveled the journey. The only way we can go past that individual scope is to have a connection to someone who has traveled the journey, ideally embodied, but if they're disembodied, they at least can intuitively guide you to the challenges that are required. But if someone is embodied, then the nature of the quality that they carry goes to you to support you once you start walking out of base camp. So it is not something that the Sattvic realized person wants to do. It will be, you'll have rationalizations and justifications why you shouldn't. You'll have a perfectly good explanation. You can actually say, this is what my experience is when I tried it and it didn't work, because it didn't fit into what I already knew, and therefore this isn't my path. That's what the spiritual ego will say. And the spiritual ego is the problem at that point. It's not the human ego, it's the remnant of the human ego that's laid claim to the spiritual experience and made it its own, whatever form it may take. So being able to go back beyond that boundary is truly what takes us out of ourselves. And it is scary, and it's challenging, and it is uncomfortable. But if you link up with someone who's traveled it, it's like getting a tow rope on a ski slope. On a ski slope for beginners, they have a tow rope, and all you do is you get on your skis and you hang on to the tow rope. And if you can kind of keep your skis from crossing each other, you'll make it up. That's what the teacher is. is a tow rope, or she's a tow rope, and you hang on to the tow rope. And it will, if you hang on, it'll get you up to the end of the beginner's slope. And then,
Yes, that's the next thing. And then,
then you feel abandoned and you don't know what to do. And then the teacher pushes you. And you discover how to go down the beginner's slope by yourself. You know, one way or another. I remember the first time I skied, my friend took me to the very top of Crystal Mountain, right looking at Mount Rainier. First time. I get off the ski. Of course, I failed 3 times getting off the carriage that took me up there. And I spent 8 hours getting down the hill. While my friend is whizzing by, he probably skied 20 times. And somehow I made it to the bottom of the hill. So this learning to ski is going to be something that has to be done with trial and error. And it has to be, crazily enough, when I fell, I always fell forward. And every time I fell forward, my thumbs went into the snow with my poles. By the end of the day, I had thumbs that were about 4 times bigger. I was a draftsman at the time, so when I went back to work, I had to hold the pencil with different fingers because my thumb was useless. But I was intrigued. And I was determined to figure out how to do it. So I went up there again, it didn't take me 8 hours to get down, but it took me about 4 hours. I didn't go all the way up to the top of the mountain this time. And each time, he wasn't a good teacher. Each time I became more proficient through doing it. So when we traverse into areas that we haven't done before, the way you get good at it is by doing it. And then doing it again. And doing it again. And not having within you the faith and the resolve and the intrigue to find what it is that's occurring for you when you do this. So the nature of the spiritual path, of course, is eventually there's this sense of being able to ski, of being able to get up the mountain and come down the mountain, this ability to traverse. I could say that skiing is the art of falling. Learning how to fall makes you a masterful skier. And that same year, I took 2 months off of work and I went to every ski resort in the entire northwestern United States. And I skied and not very well, but by the end of it, I was skied everything you could ski. The double diamond, triple diamond, all of it. So I recognize that there is something needed to go beyond the envelope of the realization of the self. It's very comfortable. It is a very happy ego. It's what ego would have been in another time. We would have been born that way. We'd have been born in that happiness and knowledge and quest for truth and this natural connection with other people and life and creation. So in this era, that we have to struggle to even get there. But that's actually the beginning of the opportunity of true transformation, because then we begin to discover our original nature. So there are some things that we can't do based on what we've already known. Territory, we're not even going to meet. Our life won't even bring it up unless you come into presence with a teacher whose light will push up the remaining hidden darkness in your system. So that process of the transformation allows you the challenges and the opportunities that would give you the skillfulness into coming into relationship with your universal nature. It's unbound. It's free. It's courageous. It has the trust, the faith that it can't lose. That it's really a confirmation of a truth that's growing in you, not through the activity itself, but as a consequence of the activity. I would call it finding. It's a process of finding. It's like when I was a young kid in our backyard, it wasn't a very nice backyard, but it had an area that used to be a garden, and what I used to love to do is dig holes. And the nature of digging holes is quite simple. You just move the dirt. So pretty soon, if you get enough holes in the backyard, which I would love to do because I'd only get down about 3 or 4 feet and then I couldn't go deeper, the backyard becomes holy. Now, my mother didn't think that was something we could get away with, so I had to fill all the holes back up. But the principle of learning to empty ourselves out is what reveals the truth of what we are. The more we dig, the more holy we become. The more dirt we can displace. The very act of displacing the dirt is a sacrificing, a making sacred by letting go or bringing forward that which we have not been able to be with.
So, given the predicament of the planet, and that there's a certain timeline here that we have to respond in certain ways, how perfect do we all need to be to respond to it?
Not very.
Okay.
Actually, Friday, we're going to be doing what we call a world peace meditation intervention. Because my work is now in the collectives. It really became very poignant this last year. And we've been doing work by connecting to each other remotely and doing a series of mantras together and lifting into the collective consciousness and being channels for this thought force to come into the world. And it is a process by which it's quite very tangible. And what it's doing is it's working in the domain of consciousness by bringing in a higher consciousness that feeds the consciousness of the 7.4 billion people on the planet and allows it to become a bit more awakened, especially those who are more receptive. And it's curious that the people who are in the positions of power, even the bad people, actually have more receptivity than persons living ordinary lives. So when you increase the vibration of consciousness, then even the person who lives in error goes through a correction process within themselves, that they can see the error or to see the opportunity that before they couldn't see. And that's what's happening now. Even financial services are now saying we're going to have to take into account the global climate change. Even the oil companies and the fossil fuel industry is getting worried that the subterfuge and the distractions they've been getting away with is going to end, and they're going to have to come to accountability. So these things are really occurring from the place of consciousness, not a place of doing. Now, how do we do this? Well, we have to do it where there's someone who can hold the base, that where you can link up with the ray that will allow you to participate with a group to affect the collective consciousness. And my teacher first did this in 2001 and spread it, but it didn't go very far. I taught it to a few people over the years since then on my own, but it's never been didn't have a motive. I was working mostly with individuals. I always felt that I'll transform the world one person at a time. But when this last season, which activated Greta Thunberg and started the motion, that was also happening in my system. So everybody who was linked has been lifted up to this sense of the peril. So I call it the peril and the purpose that arises out of the peril. And the purpose that arises out of the peril is the recognition of the correction that needs to happen so that the opportunity of humanity can be preserved. So it's one way that we can assist. Otherwise, there are many people who are organizations that are very active in climate change, and they're protesting and they're voting and they're doing all those things. And if that's still enough rajas in your nature, then that's how you can serve this sense of the new purpose that's being called up for all of humanity.
What I feel called to is the realignment of body, mind, and spirit with spirit and the natural world.
Yes.
So, but tangibly. So I've been
Something lived.
as I've been working as a meditation teacher, for example, for the last 35 years, and I really thought shifting on a consciousness level would be enough.
Yes.
And so now, I've taken a course in permaculture, and I've built a little solar cabin, and I'm, greenhouse, and I'm getting into, feet on the ground. And I'm thinking in every single domain of our life, there's a realignment of every collective social value to return it to this sense of alignment. But it would have to be one little step at a time. So it's a little step here and a little step there, and it might be a change in how we do something. That's my thought.
It's from the individual level, that is very useful, and I would say, and there is a way to work at the level with a realized being in the collective level. Because
Are you offering?
yeah, well, you're pulled to it anyway, but the principle is it doesn't require it. All it requires is your willingness to align with the force that's getting transmitted. But I want to stay with that because my work had been until about a year and a half ago, always through each person at a time. But when this opened up, there is no doubt that this thing is impacting the collective consciousness. So it's my direct experience because I was a person very much in the world. So I formed nonprofits. I owned a solar energy business. I argued for sustainable building to building departments. So I was very much trained in that entire field. So I had left that all behind, and therefore it wasn't something that I saw was effective. No matter what I did, it was 7.4 of the problem solved. But there was another rest of the 7.4 billion people on the planet that were still perpetuating the problem to varying extents. The other thing that's true, and it's true for you, and true for all of us in the West, is we've separated ourselves from nature, from the feminine principle. We have forgotten our bodies. We have forgotten how dependent we are on the earth. We have lost track of the consequences of our self-involvement and our mentalizations and our ideations and our technologies and even the most positive ideas. They've all created more pollution. They've all created opportunity and consequences. And now it's not that it's wrong, but there's a correction that needs to be in place. So I do believe it's going to be through as many of the 7.4 billion people who are pulled to this. Now, David Hawkins talks about the one realized person being equivalent to 1 million people or 10 million people or 1 billion people, so that any one of us has matured to another point that even our very presence on the planet will put in the correction. We'll have people wake up to the hidden structures that they're unwittingly perpetuating to whatever level they can receive it. So I think both. But the danger is that the rajas, to take on the actions, is not allowing your system to become deeper in the inner dimensions by the outer activity. So there needs to be a recognition. Otherwise, it's another cause. All causes are from the paradigm of idealized human ego. It's wonderful, it's the best humanity can come up with, but it's not going to be able to make a difference in the imbalance that we're now facing.
My heart calls me to it, and I hope that it will direct the way.
Okay.
And yeah.
And it might be opening up an opportunity in this moment to direct the way. Maybe there was a tow rope.
Sure.
I know. It's for you to know, though. And the nature of the tow rope is you want to be interested in it. And then you have to be interested in it enough to hang on to it. And if that's not there, then there's nothing to do but follow what you know. Yeah, very good. Thank you. covered a lot of ground. We're already done?
You can wrap up.
Okay.
You could probably do one more person, if anybody wants to come up.
What was that?
Do you have time for one more?
Oh. Good. Yes.
I don't think, well, I'm not too sure, but something has always kind of repulsed me of the idea of taking a guru.
Yeah.
Maybe it's
Good
the
instincts.
remnants of the
Yeah, it's on. We're hearing you fine.
the remnants of the ego. But I've always felt deep inside that, there's an inner voice that's guiding me, and it makes me realize stuff whenever I'm open,
Yes.
whenever I'm connected.
Yes.
But then I'm not really sure. I mean, I do feel that there is some progress. But do you think that a person could theoretically do it with the inner voice instead of having a
You can
embodied
get
guru?
an inner voice will take you so far. But the inner voice will always be shaped by the conditioning that remains in your system. The inherited patterns from your ancestor, the mythology, the superstitions, the religious culture, religious indoctrinations over the course of lifetimes. So the inner voice doesn't know how to speak to you through those veils. So it will always be colored by those veils. So it'll come maybe from a truer or a better version of yourself as an individual. It'll show you how to come into relationship with the essential quality of what you are individually. But the thing about India, and I'll tell you, I was the most self-determined human being you could have met. I was a
actually totally
self-made
imagine that.
man. I had it my way. I had it figured out. She had to adapt to me. It was this whole self-made, nobody's going to tell me what to do. All right.
Still do.
So when this came, I didn't need anything, and I had no idea. And of course, I had skepticism, but I do know when I was 19, and I had been in a dark period, I saw a picture of Meher Baba, and it blasted me. And I came out of addiction and came out of negativity, and for about 6 years, I was a Sufi. I was totally aligned with him. And I awakened to this place of being, which empowered me to come out and create a positive human personality. And then they told me, you're done, go into the world. And that's when I became an architect and went in and built my life. And that 25 years later, this awakening happened. So the nature of, there was a sense that my entire life had a lineage that linked back, Meher Baba was one, but linked back into my life so that when my awakening happened, I knew a greater force was showing itself.
Yeah.
And that wasn't from inside, it was outside. There was a definite experience of it outside in, not inside out. Up to then, it had been always inside. So if the outside in hasn't happened, if there hasn't been this transmission, there hasn't been this Shakti put, if there hasn't been this fierce truth awakening impact that calls you to a different vibration, then we're not ready.
But don't you think that places, for example, can do that, or energies, universal energies can
But
do
they
that?
don't.
Like once you, sort of get receptive enough to allow that to happen.
Mira, you know what it is? It's not on, is it? You're on. Oh. Is the teacher will call you on your shit. The energies are not going to call you on your shit. Yeah. And we are great. Somebody's got to call you on the shit.
Yeah, because it's really
when you're
personal.
ready for that,
Yeah.
then then you're ready for that.
Yeah.
But so you can go, but what he's saying is you can go a long, long way, but you're going to come up at some place where you need someone to talk back to you and give you guidance, but lovingly.
But the principle is,
Most of the time.
you use the guru. You use them. You don't, you give them, you give over to that which is representing the next leap for you, but you don't give up your wisdom, but you suspend the parts of you that would be repulsed or resist or would want to do it different. And just discover what it is that they're showing, because it would take you always beyond what you would want or what you're familiar. It'll always take you outside of what is your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And that's the work when you go from the individual into the universe. Even when you come out of your little ego. Even when you're a little kid, you got to go to first grade, you know, or you graduate from elementary school and you go in high school. You got to come out of the little paradigm. So,
The comfort zone, yeah, I do relate to that a
do.
lot, yeah.
and for me, the awakening happened without a teacher. I had no teacher, no physical anything. I didn't even have, and it didn't stop. I mean, it was as soon as I quit being busy, it came in again and again. The universe, it was Divine Mother and then Divine Father and revelations of the nature of the universe, and it was bang, bang, bang. So I was clearly
I feel
thinking,
the same though. I feel
Okay.
the same, happening to me.
Yeah.
And I do go through a lot of stuff that, I don't really like looking at, but I look
Okay.
at it anyway because it keeps coming back. I can't escape it.
okay, well then the universe is trying to do it, and at some point, it was the recognition with me that came to me, and that might have been because of Mara Baba, when I realized I needed somebody living that I could connect to, that could give me a way of understanding and holding what was happening and guide me through my shit so I could collaborate with the process. And at that moment, when I recognized I was looking, it was within a week that I met my teacher, Sri Atmananda. And he had been coming to the United States every 2 years at a place 45 minutes from our house. So literally, and when I connected to him, there was this like on both parts, the recognition that occurred. And he recognized what it was happening to me. He could explain to me right off the bat. He gave me this Bhagavad Gita and he said, there's 18 steps to the journey, read this book. And he guided Satyamai. He told her that, she's to hold the base, and if she can stick with the process, when he comes back to manifest, you and he will manifest together. So he could see things that I couldn't see. He could point out limitations that not even by speaking them, but by demonstrating a truth that was greater than my own. See, it's the nature of the power of that relationship. It's probably the most powerful relationship that can take us out of our individual awakened self into our divine self. Out of our individual divine into our universal divine. Only one who is in the universal divine can do it. The Hindus call it the Satguru. There is the Guru, but the Guru doesn't necessarily travel the whole dimension. They're innocent. They're just a vehicle. And through them comes these great forces. The Satguru knows what they're doing. The Satguru can articulate. And my Western nature, my architect design, is allowed me to create a very clear structure for the unfolding of and the empowering of that very essential reality that you are.
Okay. Wrap it up.
Would you, okay, one more question. Would you say that, like in order to be with a guru, you sort of, like all these gurus say that you leave your ego at the doorstep. But I kind of, I think...
You don't leave your self-respect at the doorstep. You leave your ego at the doorstep.
But then where would you draw the line?
Well, you wouldn't. The self-respect would be self-evident. So what is self-respect? When we meet a challenge we didn't know we could meet. When we grow beyond ourselves. Every time we discover something we didn't know before, we enhance that quality of our own sacredness as we come out of the littleness. So what are we doing with protecting our ego is protecting our littleness. So obviously, to come into a greater relationship with the truth we need to either be pulled or pushed or invited to step outside of the boundary of what we already know. Duh. And that was very clear to me. There were things about my teacher I didn't respect at all. There's things about I didn't trust at all. Guy lied all the time. He never showed up. He kept contradicting himself. From a Western ego, he was like the worst client I've ever had. Yet I kept choosing his reality as an opportunity for me to go beyond my ideas of perfection or how it should be or effectiveness or creating certain outcomes. He wasn't interested in outcomes. He was interested in just moving shit. So learning how to be in relationship with that quality was really a lesson for me, a highly organized individual human being that wanted to actually build a building, not just make pretty pictures. So this is what many people don't understand about the nature of the principle of the Guru. It really, they're only here to serve us the truth of what we are. And they're like coaches. Either they're speaking or through their presence, kicking us always to go further than we thought we could before.
And then I loved what you said about the universal forces and to like create a channel through which they flow and just upload consciousness.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So you already know of this.
Yeah.
Yes, but the grounding of this is what has to happen in your life. There has to be a way of further grounding, issues of relationship or issues of meeting difficulties in the world. There's structures in you that are unmet, you would say immature, that have to be brought forward so you can grow beyond them. So it's best not to jump onto this journey until we have our feet under us. If you're going to ski down the mountains, you better have your feet under you. So learning what it is to meet in ourselves that still doesn't have our feet under us is, you could say, an important part of the spiritual process. Is where we're still unconscious, where we still don't know how to be in life, where we're still covering our asses or protecting ourselves or trying to stay transcendent so we don't have to deal with any of it. So this is the lessons. Therefore, the Sadguru is like too much. You don't need it. You need just like a lovely, bright little eyed, wild hair guy sitting on the side of the road. I had a few of those when I came to India, where each one of them brought me a little piece of truth, a little piece of truth.
So you did pick a little bit
Yes.
here and there. That's what I do. But then everyone just keeps telling you not to. Just pick one guru and stick to it.
Well, there comes a point. You can play, there's this whole arena you can play in, and you'll notice it's horizontal. What takes you vertical is something else.
I'll ponder on that. Thank
Okay,
you.
good, thank you. Good question.
Okay.
I don't even do this anymore with my students. It's only public talks where people have an opportunity to come forward and bring their stuff forward. So, all right, well, there you go. We'll show up Tuesday next week, right?
Yes.
Tuesday next week, and Tuesdays and
Nope,
Thursdays.
we're showing up Tuesday next week, and then we're on a break because we switch to the next session. So whatever it says on the, when's the after next Tuesday? What's the next date? 31st.
The subsequent Tuesday, probably, or Thursday.
Don't worry about it.
Okay.
31st.
All right.
It's on the flyer.
It's on the flyer. Thank
Yeah.
you. We'll have some new flyers out too.
Posters on the side of the door.
Yep.
Good.
Okay. That's it.
Okay, so what we're going to do is finish with a silent sitting. I invite you to just open yourself to receive whatever you get in the vibration outside of the conversation and the entertainment in front of the room. Come into relationship with yourself to get in touch with what's there. And that's the only thing that matters, is what's there. And we'll sit for 5 minutes. It's good to just be aware of your breath. Be aware of the energy in your body. Feel yourself sitting in your chair with your feet on the ground. And just notice what arises. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat Shri. All glory to the Supreme. May truth manifest. Namaste and good night. Good evening.